Lady Gaga. Vivien Leigh, that you most certainly know from her role as Scarlett in Gone with the Wind. Ingrid Bergman from the box office hit Casablanca. Or famous designers like Karl Lagerfeld, Alberta Ferretti, Alexander McQueen, Tom Ford. They all have one thing in common. They were all inspired by the same woman, Luisa Casati. You may have never heard of her, but the first 30 years of the 20th century, she was the absolute star and worldwide protagonist of the mundane stages. She promoted art and became herself a living piece of art, and Venice became her natural theatre. It was New Year's Eve of 1910. Villa Arcore in Lombardy, Italy, was lit up for a sparkling and pompous party filled with excesses and champagne, one of the legendary parties that everyone craved to be part of. The theme of the party was none other than the Divine Comedy, the masterpiece written by Dante Alighieri. And the location? A former convent of 3,000 square meters. That's about 32,000 square feet, with 3 different themed areas representing hell, purgatory, and paradise, thus following the steps of Dante and Virgil in the Divine Comedy. To reach her, the goddess, Luisa, the guests had to walk along a tortuous way of purification, because only those who were pure had the honor to admire her, the queen of the party, Luisa Casati Stampa. Today, we will have a look at the early life of Luisa, where she came from, how she scandalized Venetian society, and how she finished years later, forgotten and poor, in London. Luisa Adele Rosa Maria Amman was born in Milan on the 23rd of January 1881 as the second daughter to the rich cotton producer Alberto Amman and his wife Lucia Bressi. Both her parents were of Austrian origins, and Alberto became an important businessman in drapery, founding different cotton weaving mills in Italy, and even became a count thanks to the Italian king Umberto III in 1887. Alberto and Lucia had 2 daughters, Francesca and Luisa. Both girls were educated at home by governesses, a common custom among wealthy families of the time. Both, for sure, had a very privileged childhood, but decidedly a solitary and isolated one. Luisa was a very shy girl, and maybe due to her quite secluded life, she nurtured a passion for the arts. And so Luisa would practice her drawing skills each and every day. But then Luisa had her debut in society. She cut her hair and highlighted her extraordinary green almond-shaped eyes, overcoming all her shyness. And later, when she was only 13 years old, a tragic event hit shy Luisa very hard: the death of her mother. And only 2 years later, when she was 15, her father passed away, thus making Luisa, together with her sister Francesca, the richest heiresses in Italy. It's probably no wonder that Luisa married just a few years later, in 1900, when she was only 19 years old. Her chosen one was Camillo Casati Stampa di Soncino, a Milanese nobleman of ancient lineage, but with little economic means. But Luisa would make up for that with her own money and by giving birth, just 1 year later, to her only daughter, Cristina. Unfortunately for Cristina, Luisa didn't really care about her. She had fulfilled her duty of giving birth to an heir to her noble husband, and so Luisa, now free of her obligations, preferred to focus all of her attention on herself, in search of a role in the world, and also lover that you would find in the famous writer Gabriele D'Annunzio. Gabriele convinced her in 1910 to move to Venice, a city that more than any other suited her elitist and decadent spirit. And it is in Venice that she chose the most surprising residence, Palazzo Venier dei Leoni, also called the Never Finished Palace as, well, as you can see in the picture, it was never finished. What you can see is the ground floor that was completed before the family Venier completely ran out of money and just left it like this. The same house became later the residence of another extraordinary woman, Peggy Guggenheim. Reason why you can actually visit the interiors of the stunning palace that was never finished, as it is the seat of the Guggenheim Museum in Venice. It was a challenge for Luisa to transform this house into the most fascinating villa in Venice, furnishing it with a very personal style. Gone were the days of red velvets, brocades, and heavy golden furniture that characterized the traditional houses of the time. Luisa instead chose black and white marble, alabaster floors, and chirping spring birds arranged in golden cages hanging from the ceiling. Her garden was transformed into a real jungle populated by cheetahs, apes, parrots, albino blackbirds, whose feathers she colored according to the inspiration or mood of the day, ocelots, tigers, and a boa constrictor, her faithful companion during her travels. The cheetahs instead, adorned with a collar of diamonds and precious stones, escorted her while she walked naked at night in St. Mark's Square. You heard right, naked at night with 2 cheetahs and a servant who followed her with a pair of lit torches so that curious onlookers could admire her, because yes, she wanted to be seen and looked at. When instead she decided to cover her beautiful body, she chose for herself almost exclusively black and white colors, floor-length strings of pearls, and was wandering around with a pair of greyhounds instead of the cheetahs. Obviously one white and the other one black. If she was not taking her gondola, that was obviously not black, because everyone could have a black gondola, but white. And yes, this all strongly reminded me of Cruella de Vil, well, at least her fashion style. Luisa was not known for hunting down 101 Dalmatians for her coats. The stage for Luisa's, well, staging was naturally Venice, this absolutely breathtaking city where the myth of Luisa Casati as the incarnation of the femme fatale began to come to life. Her aim was to make herself a supreme piece of art. And when legends and gossip started to circulate about her, the Marquise did not hesitate to feed them herself. Luisa wanted to amaze, to enchant, and to bewitch her audience, like the heroine of a grandiose epic. This is why for a certain time she used to encircle her neck with a live boa constrictor, or to walk the city with cheetahs on a leash, setting even a new fashion style. Remember that I told you about the collars that were adorned with precious stones? Guess what? These collars were actually the inspiration for an iconic Cartier jewel. And what were her husband and daughter doing while she was becoming a living piece of art? Her marriage contract from 1900 obliged her only to give birth to one child, no matter if a boy or a girl, because she wanted to keep her elegant and slim body. He put the title, she, the heir, and the money. They actually never resided in the same house, and Camillo preferred to go hunting and spending the fortune of his wife until 1924, when they definitely took separate ways by divorcing. Luisa only asked to keep one thing from her husband: his title, as she had already become famous and known as the Divina Marchesa, the Divine Marquise. And by the way, Luisa was actually the first Italian woman to divorce. Considering herself and her life a piece of art, had as a natural consequence that Luisa would also become a muse, a patron, and lover to the most famous artists of the early 20th century. She commissioned several works to Giovanni Boldini, convinced of the fact that being portrayed by this famous painter would enhance her figure amongst the people who counted. You never heard about Boldini before? Well, he was amongst the closest artists to Impressionism in Italy and known for his lively social life, which found its peak in Paris. His acquaintances granted him great fame as a talented portraitist of cultural figures and especially female figures, whom he brought back to the canvas with elegance, dynamism, and psychological characterization. In depicting women, Boldini focuses on certain recurring details, such as the neck, the back, an elegant profile, bare shoulders, and a daring neckline, or the elegance of the dress when it is closed at the neck or complemented by a showy hat. The acquaintance between Boldini and Casati was mediated by D'Annunzio and occurred in Venice during a luxurious lunch at the famous Hotel Danieli. Yes, the Danieli Hotel that you can see in the movie The Tourist, and where you can find the bar that James Bond loves to take a drink in. It is said that whilst the two were sitting in the Danieli, Luisa's necklace broke, sending dozens of pearls to end up under the table. Whilst they were intent on collecting the pearls, the painter suddenly found himself staring at the woman's face. It was under a table that I found myself face to face with her, and I saw for the first time, up close, her immense eyes, tall and angular, of an unconventional beauty for the time. Casati boasted two green eyes, intense and magnetic, which she loved to emphasize by drawing circles around them with kohl and moistening them with drops of belladonna to dilate their pupils. The first painting that Boldini did for Luisa was the one with a greyhound that was exhibited in Paris on the occasion of the Salon of 1909. The painting was a huge success and immediately nicknamed the anti-Mona Lisa, precisely because of the feral gaze of the Marquise, a predatory and captivating gaze, very different from the enigmatic and reassuring one of Leonardo's work. This strategic move by Luisa made sure that she became the most represented woman in art after the Virgin Mary. Especially the shot by Man Ray of 1922 remains emblematic and shows us also how mistake can create a masterpiece. He reproduced her with not 2 but 6 eyes, an oversight that mortified the photographer but thrilled Luisa, who for the first time in her life saw her so perfectly portrayed. She ordered numerous copies of the photograph to send them to friends, lovers and rivals. Man Ray, thanks to that photo, greatly increased his fame and later described their meeting like this. One day, I received a visit from a tall and imposing woman, dressed in black, her huge eyes emphasized by very dark makeup. She wore a high black lace hairstyle. She introduced herself as the Marchesa Casati and expressed the desire to be photographed, but in the living room of her house, surrounded by her favorite objects. Before I showed up at the agreed appointment, I inquired about her. She was famous in aristocratic circles and passed for an eccentric. Her villa in Italy had been the scene of sumptuous and sophisticated parties. Luisa Casati was not only considered an eccentric woman, but also one of the best-dressed women in Europe. With her very personal style, she was able to anticipate the times, driven by the ambition to push her wardrobe beyond what was fashionable. Again, it was her stay in Venice that permitted her to study and create her fascinating mask based on strong female characters that had inspired her during her childhood and teenager years. One of them was the Princess of Belgioioso, Cristina Trivulzio di Belgioioso, a journalist, traveler, and writer born in Milan in 1808. Cristina was married to the Prince Emilio Barbiano di Belgioioso, a very famous libertine who cheated several times on her during the marriage. A fact that she didn't accept and decided to separate from him would cause a lot of gossip, as this was not considered a decorative attitude by society. But Cristina didn't care and followed her way to France, where she financed her life by giving painting lessons and also started to write for the Costitutionnel, translating also articles from the English language treating Italian politics. Because don't forget, Cristina lived during the Italian Risorgimento time, when Italy, as we know today, slowly started to take shape. Thus, she knew the big players like the Count Cavour, Niccolò Tomaseo, Giuseppe Montanelli, and fought herself to create a united Italy. Imagine that even a statue in Milan is dedicated to this very strong woman that inspired Luisa Casati for her daring makeup. Another idol for Luisa, la divine Sarah Bernard, the greatest French actress of the late 19th century. Bernard, enchanted with her voice that was described as a golden bell, and her grace, beauty, and charisma gave her a commanding stage presence. Sarah Bernard's career was also helped by her unconventional behavior both on and off the stage, becoming soon an international idol and the first internationally known star, touring in Europe, the United States, Canada, and even Australia and South America. Bernard even played several male roles and was also one of the first women known to have performed the title role in Hamlet. La Divine Sarah inspired Louis especially for her vivid red hair. Last but not least, the Countess of Castiglione, an aristocrat and spy that loved to present herself in very striking outfits. Her cousin was Camillo Count of Cavour, none else than the Prime Minister of Victor Emmanuel II, King of Sardinia, and later King of the reunited Italy. Eventually, the Countess was under her cousin's instructions as a kind of female James Bond to plead the cause of Italian unity with Napoleon III of France. She achieved notoriety by becoming Napoleon III's mistress. I mean, who could possibly resist a man with this elaborate beard style? And by having a brief affair with none else than the King Victor Emmanuel II of Italy. The Countess was known for her beauty and her flamboyant entrances in elaborate dresses at the imperial court. One of her most infamous outfits was a Queen of Hearts costume. She was described as having long, wavy blonde hair, a fair complexion, a delicate oval face, and eyes that constantly changed color from green to an extraordinary blue-violet. All these astounding women, Christina, Sarah, and Virginia, their strength, independence, and style were merged into one in the person of Luisa Casati, whose metamorphosis took place under the eyes of everyone. Luisa recognized the talent of artists and artisans that helped her to create her new mask and costume, using her money for them and their work. Especially Mariano Fortuny, whom she admired for the singular and sumptuous motifs of his fabrics. But how much does it cost to become an icon, an influencer, and also a goddess, you might ask? In 1923, Luisa bought the Palais Rose, a luxurious chateau located on the outskirts of Paris, where she continued her expensive lifestyle, decorating everything in black and white, gold, skins of wild animals, parrots, a boa constrictor, 2 tigers, and a mechanical embalmed panther who should keep thieves away. She transformed the library of the former owner into an art gallery composed of her portraits only, more than 130 of them. And so, after her debut in Venice, Luisa continued amusing herself in Paris with parties and masked balls in which, by now, many participated more out of curiosity than out of real interest. The legendary ball of Cagliostro cost her more than 500,000 francs at the time, but the Marquise star was at the turn of its splendor. An addiction to drugs, alcohol, and opiates was making sure she was taking a road of no return. For the first time in her life, she got aware of the fact that her resources couldn't continue for long to finance her lifestyle, and so she sold her shares of her father's cotton weaving mills and some real estate, fresh money she would use to continue her lifestyle and to collect objects that were once property of the Countess of Castiglione, one of her heroines of her childhood. But the money was still not enough, and so the Marquise started to exchange jewels and other expensive objects to soothe her creditors. She even paid taxi drivers and shop owners with diamond bracelets, rings, and emeralds. When she turned 50 years old, Luisa had accumulated a debt that would nowadays amount to 25 million euros. She was forced to auction off all of her property and had to find herself a new home. Fortunately for her, she was hosted and supported by very generous friends. With all these debts in France and Italy, Luisa decided to move to England, where her former lover, Augustus John, opened a bank account for her, where friends, her daughter Christina, and her niece could deposit now and then some money for the former diva. Luisa walked the streets of London with worn-out velvet clothes, doing her smoky eyes look with nothing else than shoe cream, as real makeup was too expensive for her. She also continued to dye her hair in a vivid red color and added belladonna to her eyes to make them shine. But still, even in this difficult situation, without any money, she continued calling friends, telling them, "I have 10 shillings, let's have a bottle of bad wine or a tour in a cab." On the 1st June 1957, Luisa Casati died in London. She was 76 years old. She was buried wrapped in her black leopard-trimmed cloak with 2 layered eyes and false eyelashes. At her feet was placed her beloved in-bulb bikinis. Her niece chose for her epitaph Shakespeare's description of Cleopatra. "Age cannot wither her, nor habit make her infinite variety insipid." The figure of Luisa Casati is a dream that does not go out, and it still inspires many artists, directors, actors, and stylists alike. Characters based specifically or more loosely on her came to be portrayed by such legendary actresses as Elizabeth Taylor and Ingrid Bergman. The lore of a riveting gaze even inspired famous writers like Esther Pound and Tennessee Williams. Have you ever heard about Luisa before? Or do you know any contemporary artists or singers that she might have inspired? Let me know in the comment section below, and thank you so much for watching.